I think the first thing that usually comes up when new programmers start looking in the Krita code base is they start to get really overwhelmed with all of the code, all of the classes. There's a lot going on, and usually in university or higher education, when you learn programming, you really don't get put in the type of situation that you usually see when you start helping out with a project like Krita. So we're going to go over some techniques that I kind of use to help move around in code and find things. The first thing I usually do is, if there's something I really don't know where it's at, I actually start Krita and I look around. So we're just gonna start the program. Let's say if, for example, I wanted to make some changes with the crop tool. So if I really had no idea where to go, I would start looking around for tooltips and kind of these text hooks that I kind of call them for finding things. So for example, the crop tool is right here. So if I just hover over it, it's called crop tool. So there's a good chance if I search for this text in the whole code base, it's going to be in there somewhere. So once I found that, I can just go over here. I use Control Shift F. Sometimes that just brings up this thing, kind of the search across the whole project, and then I usually put it in quotes, because pretty much all the text on the UI is in quotes because they are strings in the end. So this one, there's not a whole lot. This one, there's only one instance of it, so this was pretty easy to find. So this is kind of the file for it. So you can just go in here and then, yeah, you can start kind of looking at the code to see what's going on with it. I'll just do oops. Just hit F4, and then from here you can kind of start studying what's going on with everything. If you're looking at a lot of this code, a pretty helpful thing is to be able to toggle collapsing and expanding all of these functions. I think sometimes classes like this get really long, so I think it's hard to sometimes make changes. For example, if you're doing a lot of changes to this function, it can get kind of disorienting when you go back and forth, and then if you lose your place and get back to it. So there's a shortcut that I like to set that I use pretty often. So go to Tools, Options, and then and it's called Unfold All. It says Unfold All, but it's actually a toggle, and I usually set it to Control Shift Alt F. So if you just click this Start Recording, you can kind of press the key shortcut and it'll fill everything in. You can hit Stop Shortcut and hit Apply, and then now if I use that shortcut, it'll kind of collapse everything. So for example, if I was doing this borderline, it's a lot easier to go back to it and make changes. Sometimes it's easier to manage bigger files that way. So that's a nice shortcut. The other thing you might want to change on this thing is user interface stuff. The user interface things are generally not done in code. Sometimes the user interface is generated in code, but for a lot of the advanced layouts, it's actually done kind of in its own UI file. That's a Qt concept. So for example, let's go to this reference image Docker. So I don't remember what the class is called, but let's just do a search on this text here, and that should find it. Add, select, and image. So here, a lot of the user interface stuff has these .ui extensions. So if you double click that, it starts out with this XML type view. So this is how it looks in code, but Qt Creator has this really nice user interface editor. So on here, you can switch the mode to UI. So if you click that, you can see all of the widgets here type of thing, and you can select them. You can change some of the properties here, and you can add new ones. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail with how to customize this and use this, but just know a lot of the user interface stuff is here. And then if you want to start, say if you want to change how this functions and how this hooks up, usually what I do is the object name is kind of the variable of how you reference it in code. So I usually just copy it here, and then I'll just do a search on this variable. And then it's this guy right here, because this is the only C++ file. The UI underscore file, you'll notice that's in the build directory. What that means is these user interface files are something kind of specific to the Qt framework. So it under the hood, when it builds, it actually generates these. You don't have to really worry about them. It pretty much takes all your nice looking designs in XML and converts it to more or less a C++ file and to figure everything out. So it kind of saves you from having to deal with code. But if you want to change the actual variable, it's kind of used right here. So I just figured the tool reference image widget.c++. That's pretty much usually where they're all at if it's a .c++ file. So yeah, that's kind of how you could access it. And then another thing I like to do is if you just control copy it and paste it in this find area, and if you hit control G, it'll kind of show you all of the places that it exists. And then from here you can start changing properties for it. So for example, I can make it disabled, so I can do set enabled, and then I could do false. So now I think when the application would first start, this would make this checkbox disabled. So that's kind of how you can kind of navigate around the UI and hook up variables with the user interface stuff.